So hello everyone. Today we're here for the first weekly update on utmo development. As I mentioned on our previous conversations, the plan is to do those weekly, as the name suggests, and to do them every Monday. So not necessarily talking about like having a video going through the changes every week, but at least a very detailed post about the changes that we are introducing, things that we have fixed, and things like that. So let's get started because the change log today is very large. So yeah. So first, I have a brand new install of WPUtmo here. Uh, and I'll go grab the latest version, which is the one that I'm going to release later today. Let's install it. So this is a local machine running OBS at the same time, so you might see some slowness here and there. So let's go through the installation process. Yeah, going to activate it here. Sorry, just so I don't leak my license key again, because last time that I did that, I had to cancel, and it was the license key that we used for everything, and it really sucked. So now that we have the account active, um, come here. Let's install the defaults, and we are ready. Okay, so let's go more or less point by point. So this release adds a couple of options that I think are important to cover. So the first thing that I want to show you is that we now have a resend verification email on the thank you page. So if we open this on an incognito window, let's go to register. And we have everything here. Let me go grab our mail hog just so we can see if we get emails or not. We got one already. Yeah, let's go back. So if I try to create an account here, it's just a free plan, nothing too fancy. You see that we land on the thank you page as before, and we had a couple of customers that had an issue with the confirmation email. The confirmation email was not arriving. We fixed that, and just for good measure, we actually added an option to resend it. So you can resend the verification email if something wrongs happen along the way. And for the super admin, if we go to the customer and click manage, there's also a resend verification email option here. And they all do the same thing. So that's the first item. Now we have options to save checkout fields as user meta. So before we had options that allows us to add fields, for example, a text field. Let's go with first name, and you could save it as customer, site, meta or site option. We now have two more options, user meta and do not save. Do not save, as the name suggests, will not save the option, but we'll use it as the part of the search and replace uh, logic. But now, if you choose to save it as user meta and you match the field ID with the name that WordPress expects things to have. So if you have a first and last name, for example, and we save both as user meta, then we can grab the checkout button to the end here and save it. Let's go back here, log out, and click create an account, and we go with free, and we change to John Smith checkout. You'll see that WP Ultimo saves the name, the user meta, and whenever we can, we do some extra logic there to make sure that we set the display name correctly and things like that. So that's another thing that we are adding. Let's go back to our list here. Let me. Um, so we had a request from Philip asking us to add an option where we could make SSO calls just happen only on the login page. So we now have an option for that. So if we go to domain mapping here, so we have here, if you have SSO enabled, you can restrict SSO checks to login pages now. We also moved the SSO calls to the new Ajax endpoint, which makes them much faster. So even if you decide not to restrict them to the login page only, you probably have some benefits from this build anyways. So these two options were requested by Deepak, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's his name. The idea here is that sometimes, depending on how your network is set up or how other things are working, the job queue might get crowded sometimes. So we added two options here. The first is to the enable screenshot generator, which is turned on by default, but you can turn it off. And when you turn it off, you will no longer have the automatic screenshot scraper calls that can hog up space on the job queue. And the other option that we added was the forced synchronous site publication. So right now, when you create an account on WP Ultimo, the site publication process happens on the background. If you toggle this option, you can force it to happen on the same request as the registration. That has some benefits because it happens automatically, but at the same time, if you have a huge site template, it might lead to things like timeouts and things like that. So I would recommend being careful with that option. We did a good cleanup on the checkout forms editor page. So we removed a bunch of options that were obsolete. We made sure that we have tabs that make a bit more sense. And now the controls for the size and the classes for fields and ID and classes for steps are all working as intended. Uh, we also did some performance improvements. We had a check that was running pretty much on every page load to check for the active theme, and we managed to add a cache to that to make sure it doesn't impact your uh, page load as much. We also added the Cloudflare DNS entries to our comparison table when adding a domain mapping. So I can give you an example of how that works. I'll probably have to invalidate my thing another time. But let me configure the Cloudflare integration here. Okay, let me grab this and pull it to the side, just so I can enter my keys here. That's not the right key. Where's the right key? Okay, so maybe, okay, setup is done. So finish. So now let me add a domain just so you can have an idea of what I'm talking about. So let's add a domain. So what was happening is that when you entered a DNS, a domain that you have set up on Cloudflare, the problem was that Cloudflare, if you have proxy enabled, the IP will never match with the IP of your network. So the domain is never going to progress through the different stages. So now if you had the Cloudflare integration active, we inject the Cloudflare entries here as well. That way you can make sure, we can make sure that we are comparing with with the right domain. And once we have that, we can progress the domain through the different checks that we have. So that was a problem that Dustin was having, and that uh, is no longer a problem. Yeah, so yep, this one we already covered. So I also added an option to remove the hover to zoom. So right now at pretty much every image on the WPUtmo UI, if you hover with your mouse, you get a zoom, and that's annoying for some people. So now here in other options, you can disable that option and you no longer be annoyed. So just so it no longer happens, but it keeps them where they matter, which is those preview blocks here. Okay, these are for the Gutenberg blocks. It's hard to demonstrate, so I'm going to skip it. But basically, when you added a block, WPUtmo block to Gutenberg, the default values for the fields were not being properly loaded. So that was the idea here. So another thing that we got a lot, when you add a new product, uh, and it costs this much, we'll show you a message to let you know, and new customers know that when you add a product, it doesn't automatically get added to the checkout form, and you can go and add it manually here. So we added that. Did the same thing for site templates. Here on the Cpanel and Cloudflare integration, we made the descriptions a bit better, just to make sure that it's easier to understand the purpose of those integrations. Now, if you disable WP Utmo and you do not remove your uh, Sunrise file, we'll show you this message here that tells you that you might find some unexpected behaviors here and there, and that you should remove the defined sunrise true if you no longer plan on using WP Ultimo. Yeah, this one here is pretty special. So now we added the logic that allows for some kinds of of fields, of the registration fields, to become uh, auto-submittable. So let me show you what that means. It sounds complicated, but it's not. So let's add a new step here. Plan. Let's add it here. Let me drop this just so it's easier to drag. And let's bring the pricing tables here. So if I log out here and go back to the registration page, you see that now when you only have the pricing table, if you click it, it auto submits and you go to the next step. But if you add an additional field, for example, and now I'll need the submit button here. Next, let me say that. Now, if you have an extra field, it doesn't submit, and it requires you to actually go through the process of submitting. So that was another one. Yeah, and on that same vein, if we drop those back, let me remove this. So now we have the plans here, and it's the only field. If I added that field and I selected hide when pre-selected here, so let me show you the default behavior first. So let me go back here, and now we have the field alone. But if I enter the URL with the slug, the product gets pre-selected. But it doesn't really make sense to have this step anymore. So now with that option, what you are allowed to do is that you can hide when pre-selected. And if I save it here and I go back, if I go back to the regular register page, we have the field, but if we go to premium, it skips the field selection altogether, so you can you don't need to offer the option to change to your customer. Okay, so we had a bunch of incompatibility issues with Oxygen. There is a Portuguese friend on the community that reported this. It was fixed. We have some improvements here, enforcing validation rules for template selection. This one we covered as well. The auto-generate fields are now working. So for most of the fields like username, You can auto-generate those based on the user email address. The same is true for the site URL and even for the site title. So those auto generation features were not working that well. Now they are. Fixed some JavaScript incompatibilities with Fluent CRM, UiPress. Um, we fixed some cart validations that were not happening when you had a period, a price variation selector. A bunch of other minor stuff here, just general bug fixing. Um, very minor. We had this huge one here where WP Ultimo blocks were being registered to subsites. Now they're not, or to customer-owned subsites. We had issues with duplicating template sites or publishing them in some scenarios. The cPanel integration was not working if you didn't enter the port. Now it uses the default. We did some cleanup on the legacy templates, domain mapping redirection. Discount code now increases the use count when a new payment is successfully made. Book delete for discount codes. We had a fatal error with a PDF generation class that was that it's only used on certain environments, but it was breaking things. And now some other minor stuff here with Elementor, with adding notes, and this one is pretty big as well. I know that Andre was having this issue, so if we add another step here, let me template, let me add a step, drag this all the way to the top here, and let me add a template selector. Okay, seems good to me. So one thing that now is working again is that when you have a, okay, let me drop this. When you click to view a template and you click the use this template, we select it and auto submit the form if that's available. So previously on the previous versions, that was not happening at all. So we managed to get that back to a working state. And as you can see, the template field, template selection field, also auto submits when it's alone on a step. So yeah, I think that covers it. We'll probably have another build later this week with changes to some fixes to the migrator, with some tests that we are doing. But yeah, I think that covers it. Yeah, I see you next week. Thank you.